So my name is Dieuwe Boer. I work at Spikes Interactive here in Auckland. And as back-end developer, of course, everything that happens with config is on me. So yeah, I thought rather than give you just my opinion, I'd grab a bunch of great people who at least told me they know what they're talking about. So we'll find out if they really do. This is Ben from Catalyst. Would you want to introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, sure. So yeah, I work at Catalyst as a full stack Drupal developer as well, and yeah, I've been doing a lot of config management this year, doing a bit of getting into the environment specific and the multi-site stuff, and just having coming across situations with more questions than answers. So yeah, really excited to have a panel about it. Oh yeah, so basically the plan for today is we've got a bunch of questions about what we think are the kind of most important issues or kind of most common problems you'll face using configuration management, or that there are a bunch of different approaches to solve those problems existing. And we just want to hear from the panelists as to how they have solved those problems in their projects. And then at the end, we want to kind of open it up to have a lot of audience questions, time allowing, to if anyone else has any other problems that they want to kind of bring to the panel and see what's been done or what suggested solutions are.
Okay, so could everyone just give a 10-second introduction? Just give everyone your name and we'll start with the first question. So just pass the mic down.
Okay, hi, I'm Denham. You just met me. And you got a pretty good overview of my state of configuration management and how we work with that. So.
Hi, my name is Roman. I'm a technical architect at Acquia, based in Melbourne, and I've been working with configuration management pretty much since, well, delivering projects using configuration management pretty much since it has been released, and just recently ventured into multi-site setup with configuration management, so that has pretty interesting stuff in it. Can you talk about it? Thanks.
Hi, my name is Gareth. I run a small Drupal agency here in Auckland, about 5 developers or so. And yeah, I mean, everything is Drupal 8, and we use configuration management on every project, and certainly from a dev test development or dev test live sort of setup. So some good ways to split up your configuration between different environments.
Hi, I'm Adam Bramley from Previous Next. I've been using Drupal 8 for almost 2 years now. Done both sort of install profile driven and just exporting config as Drupal does with core. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. So the first question is, what is your a broad overview of the workflow you're using for configuration management? So are you just using core configuration management itself? Are you using any contrib modules? And what are the big pain points that you've come across? What are the big problems that you're really facing at the moment?
If you're holding the mic, you next time.
I see how it works. It really depends on the project and what's the ultimate goal. If you're dealing just with one side, and you've got dev, stage, and prod, you can get away with just using core functionality. There are some issues, I guess, if you want to enable some module. Well, I guess all of us want that. Enable some modules on dev, disable some modules on the prod. And there are a couple of ways how you can solve that. I've been dealing with, I think, all of them. So you can obviously do the runtime overrides, or you can use something like config split or config ignore. I'm actually interested to hear about everyone else and how to solve this problem, depending on what requirements are. What I've been using config split pretty actively and successfully, I would say, lately, and I actually love that, and I think it's a way to go for now.
Anyone doing anything other than config split here? Adam, maybe?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I've done both the install profile driven kind of style that Bevan was doing. While you were actually talking, I do think I remember what we did to get around the site UUID issue. So I first built this profile demo where we were just basically setting that site UUID before importing config, so I think that solved it for us. Yeah, so that was kind of our first project when I was working at Department of Justice. At Previous Next, we use a contrib module called Drush CMI Tools, which is on GitHub. That's basically just a wrapper around using cores config, importing and exporting, but gives you sort of the power of being able to ignore certain config on import, or export, sorry, and delete certain config on import, as well as partial and also things like installing a piece of configuration just once. So it means you can, you still get the ease of use of just being able to shovel your config in a single directory, and have all your dependencies managed through those core functionalities, but also gives you a little bit more flexibility.
Just to interrupt, does everyone here know how config split works versus how core works? Can you raise your hand if you don't know how config split works, and then just one quick explanation. So a lot of people don't know how config split works. So normally with core config is you run config import and config export, and it gets it from the database into your sync directory. So you have a single sync directory, all your config is in there, you sync it into the database, you sync it back from the database. What config split does is it's a contrib module that allows you to specify multiple directories. So you have like a shared directory and a dev directory and a prod directory, and then in your settings.php you switch a flag on which directories you want to merge into your config. So on your prod site you say get me the shared config and the prod config, and it'll merge those into your site. Then on your dev site you say grab me the shared config and the dev config, and it'll merge those. So it allows you to split things out into multiple directories, as opposed to just having the single directory where, for instance, you might have the devel module enabled on your dev site, but then you don't want to deploy that to prod, so you end up having to disable and re-enable the dev module every single time you want to do a commit. So that's basically where config split comes in. And as Adam said, he's got ways of working around it with other tools, config ignore module, or the Drush CMI tools, things like that. Right, thanks. Anybody want to add to this? Or?
I might just add to that. You don't really say use shared, you just override. So instead of saying I'm using shared and live config or shared and test config, you just say, no, my live is the active config and stage or test or dev is deactivated. So it's just in the settings file, just an array with a key value pair, true false sort of thing. So it's relatively straightforward. It's a little bit weird when you export the configuration, like if you're on the production server and you run some export there, then it'll make some weird version control things, but you just do it diff and you look at it and go, yeah, you know, that's all right, and you move on from that. It's not always ideal and perfectly clear, and sometimes you have to rebuild the cache and stuff like that to pick it up properly, but across the board it seems to work reasonably well. It's a little bit unclear when you and how you override it. You sort of like get a UI, and then you kind of have to pick which ones you have to override. So, you know, if you use a payment gateway, then you have to know, well, I only want to pick this file, and then let's say you've got I don't know, on not a good example, but let's say on your development environment you want to use PayPal, in your live environment where you use Stripe, and so you then select those two configurations. But you then have to remember to add quarter extensions in there too, because that is, so you just add the overrides to your environment files, really is what it comes down. You don't add everything. So your shared will have hundreds of files like you used to see in your config, and then your overrides will have 3 or 4 or however many modules you override.
Yeah. Cool. So moving on from kind of the general workflow, I think one of the big kind of first issues, we haven't talked about it, but one of the first issues you run into with configuration management is that whole environment-specific stuff, but also then further into multi-site configuration. Have any of you had any other approaches, I guess, particularly towards that multi-site side of things, of how you can share and override config in those environments?
It's been a long time since we've used multi-site, so I'm just going to pass this on.
Yeah, sure. So I have been using config split for multi-site. So basically, you would bundle some of the feature splits, so-called, with config split, and I guess the issue with that is UID, as already been mentioned. The way how I've got away with that so far is setting the same UID for all the sites, which is not perfect. And I know there's a pending patch for Drupal 8.5. Hopefully that will be accepted into the core soon, where that should be resolved. Yeah, but at the moment, basically, if you think about features and how we use features in Drupal 7, you can separate config in config split folders. There's really weird definition of this gray splitting or conditional split it's called conditional split or blacklist and gray list. So it's an unconditional split and conditional split, I believe, which means that it will only export the configuration into your, let's say, site-specific split if it's different from the default, which is pretty handy. But I feel like a lot of people got confused at what it means, what it does. But at the end of the day, it works. I'm not sure how to really squeeze that explanation of how it works in this short session. But if anyone's interested, feel free to just
You got a duplicate. Sorry. So for each of the multi-sites, do you have a directory for that config, or are you using a single config directory? And then are you doing a stage override plus a per multi-site override? Or is it like, I've got a directory for everyone and I've got override directories for every multi-site directory?
All right. So I believe you can do it actually both ways. But the way I've been doing it is there's one config folder, and then you have the default folder. You would have a feature split, and you would have a site-specific split as well, and environment-specific splits. So it's a quite complex, I guess, structure, but it does work. Well, yeah, as long as you're using gray list or conditional split properly, yeah, as soon as you do configuration export, then you have to eyeball it, and it's like, okay, what I actually need. Unfortunately, that's what you have to deal with at the moment. I don't know, maybe someone solved it. I haven't yet, but unfortunately there's a little bit of manual work still involved in the configuration.
Yeah, I think as far as everyone is that I've talked to anyway, is when you do a config export, always check, always double check before you commit it, basically, is a good rule of thumb there. I can add one question here before we move on.
Yeah, general config split export cache issue. So how do you deal with you change the configuration split config itself, and then it's cached, so it's not picked up like when you first change it. How do you deal with it?
Sorry, cached, because config lives in the database.
Yeah, right. So you've changed your configuration of your split.
Yeah.
In your dev environment for the stage environment, let's say. And you've pushed this config to the stage.
Yep.
So the config in the database have no idea about your changes. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so you make the changes in your local copy, obviously, and then you push it up, and that's on a different get repo or a different get branch. Usually case rebuild is enough, and then just drush import config. And config split takes care of that. It understands that, hey, my active configuration is shared plus, live config's turned off, dev config's turned off, but stage is turned on, and it just imports it. Just with case rebuild. And then case rebuild, and then drush sim, dash yes, be brave, and then it seems to work pretty well for us.
Minus force.
dash force. Okay. Ben, can I ask the next question?
Cool. So next question, I guess, is in terms of I guess a big broad question in terms of what do you see as content and what do you see as config. I know there's some questions around things like web forms and blocks that you often want to let kind of more content editors sometimes manage on the site, but those things get stored in config, so if you re-import your config, you might blow away their changes. How have you managed that? Do you just stop clients from editing those pieces of config? Do you use something like config ignore? What are your thoughts on those kind of approaches?
For us, we used to use config ignore, and we stopped using it because it doesn't necessarily make it clear what's happening. I found that it's providing a little bit of disinformation because you run config on the board, and when you run export, it still exports it, but then it creates it and deletes it. It does some weird stuff, and then you sort of go a little bit guessing what's happened. So definitely config split is our preferred way. In terms of the question, that's a tough one, right? Because I mean, we use blocks, and now that blocks can be fielded and they're just entities, we build all these weird blocks that's a little photo gallery or all kinds of stuff. And so, you know, some of it you go, well, yeah, that should totally be configuration management. For example, you know, we built a complicated block and it needs to go in the sidebar, so that makes sense to be in config. But then a client goes, well, I want to change the position of it, which they should be able to do, and suddenly your production environment now have a config variation. Web forms are even worse. You know, the client want to go just a normal web form module, and they want to add a new email address, or they want to CC an email address, or they want to subtly change what gets emailed to them, all kinds of those sort of things. These are reasonable edits that the client want to do, and then it goes in configuration management. There's no easy answer for us, unfortunately. It's even worse when the client creates a block on their own, and that gets added to configuration, and you try and import config. You go to the production server and you run, export the configuration. I'll try and import it on stage or dev, and the thing poops itself because it goes, I can't find this block, and you go, oh, great, and you end up editing files manually to make it pass, or download it into your database. Look, it's not ideal. Unfortunately, I mean, we had a little chat yesterday, and we couldn't find an easy answer. I mean, we just end up having to deal with it on a case-by-case basis. From a workflow perspective, really what I've done is I've locked down the production server. Only 2 or so staff members have access to it, and only they can deploy to production, and we have a workflow. Before you run configuration import, go check that there's no active configuration that hasn't been exported. And that's the only way we've successfully dealt with that so far.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
All of this sounds incredibly complex. So I guess our whole philosophy, right, is to keep it really simple. And to do that, a single directory is really the way to go. You're never going to get it perfect because, yeah, as you say, there's all these certain things that clients may want to edit. With the Drush CMI tools library that we use, on import, it's technically doing a partial import, so it doesn't delete anything that's not there anymore. You have to actively specify that in like a separate YAML file. So if you have clients wanting to create web forms, then you can add like a regex that will ignore exporting all the web forms. So for example, if you say, okay, web forms are all yours, ignore webform.star, and then when you sync, for example, sync a database back and export, you're not going to have to manually add those new files to Git or anything like that. But then also when you import on production, you're not going to delete anything. In terms of custom blocks and stuff like that, I always think that complex blocks should probably be built in PHP, not in as block content, or getting into the realm of using paragraphs or that kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get around that whole problem if you structure a site a certain way. And keeping it simple is really important, I think.
I just wanted to go back to the install profile concept a bit that didn't really come across this problem a lot because of the case that you providing default content that's imported when you install the site. That you've got the other module with client-specific stuff, and with that update manager's page on there, you can go to production actually because everything's default content that tells you what's changes, what's added. You can see explicitly anything that the client has made changes to. and it's a manual process, but then you're still in that, you're in a, you can see exactly what changes they've made, and so all your stuff is still in code. And when you're deploying over the top, because you're explicitly writing update hooks, you can choose when you're actually pushing that up. You know, I can go to production, I can see what they've changed, I can see the change I made is going to override theirs. I can just not write the update hook and keep their config the same way as it was, because I'm basically importing content on a piece by piece basis. So it's a little bit manual, but during that development process, you're in the flow and you're on top of it anyway. So the issue's there, but it's mitigated to some extent. But I think there's a lot of other challenges as well. So
I just want to clarify for you, so you don't run on the specific site, you don't run config import on the live site in that case. Okay, cool. So that's one option, of course, don't run config import on your live site. You can field the next question.
Yeah, so the last question from us, maybe just across all the panelists, what are your thoughts for the future of configuration management? Any new contrib projects to solve issues you'd like to see? Anything you'd like to see fixed or moved into core? What's next?
Start Bevan and move across maybe? Okay, go first, Ryan.
Well, I think it would be really nice to be able to do sort of similar stuff what we used to be able to do with features. You know, disable modules if you need to disable them at some point. Like, for example, one of the issues that I had, I wanted to create a config split that would call go live. That would just disable the shield module when you decide to. And I actually faced the issue because I couldn't disable the module. You need to write either like update hook to do that. And because config split is not a module, you actually cannot do that. So I would actually love the opportunity to be able to control which modules are disabled, not just enabled, but disabled as well. And yeah, just set dependencies of a config split on another config split. So when you have a config split of a landing page, and it depends on another config split that's article content type, they'd be really handy to actually have that control, because at the moment there's none. And obviously this UAD issue, I'm really keen to see that being resolved at some point. Yeah, yes, that's it.
I think everyone's noticed I like config split, so for me, I think config split should make it into core. I think it's incredibly useful. In terms of things I think that needs work, I think that modules and entities and all these kinds of configurations should have the ability to say, enforce UUIDs or not. That would solve a lot of problems, because sometimes you go, yes, I'm the developer, I know what I'm doing, I'll take the blame if something goes wrong, just do it already. That would be useful. Some other issues that is annoying, so as a recommendation, I would always say your config should be in version control in one way, just using the built-in sort of like download all of the config and upload it. It's way too dodgy for me to do that on a big site. So when you run these exporters, oftentimes you'll go, I don't know, you run it on one server compared to another server, and suddenly all the truths will change to ones. And you go, thanks for that version control change, it does nothing. Or it just changes the order of the elements. For example, if you use Drush to export the config, and then, I don't know, for some reason, another developer in the team says, well, I like, you know, Drupal console, then it reorders all the files, and you go, great, it's really easy to find that change now. And so, certainly standardize, and everyone say, either everyone uses console, or everyone uses Drush. And it would be good if those two projects can say, okay, well, we're going to handle this the same way. We're either not going to change the order of the key value pairs, or something like that.
So similar to Roman, I think my biggest problem would be having different modules enabled. So when you have that single config directory, my environment-specific config comes from settings.php, which is then calling, reading some files which are provisioned by a Kubernetes config map. Did I get that right, Nick? So that stuff's all good and well, but you can't terms of core functionality, I think you can get away with a lot with just using that. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Anything to add there?
No.
We're good. Right,
Sorry,
well,
when you say you guys can't enable different modules in different environments, is that purely because you don't want to run config import on production? Because if you do that with config split, it will totally disable the modules for you. We do it all the time.
No, I don't want to use config split.
Sucks to be you.
Not really. It sounds like my processes are a lot.
Use the mic.
No, but like, in my particular case, it was the shield. When you want that enabled to some point, and when you decide to go live in production, you just want to flip the switch and disable it. And it doesn't happen, unfortunately. So you have to either do something manual, settings PHP, or, well, you cannot disable the module with settings PHP, but maybe come up with another split that will actually disable the module. But that's sort of defeats the whole purpose of having that split. You could just do manual production anyway. Do we have still time to discuss? Or
So we've officially run out of time, so I'm wanting to decide so everyone can go if they want. But if anyone has any questions, I think we could probably squeeze in a few from the audience.
Back there.
Hi. I think with conditional disabling of the module, I want to add something on top of that. Either you can add it to local setup or deployment of that particular environment where you can enable those modules and then ignore them in config import or export, whatever. Right? There's one way to do that. Right now in core, there is a patch proposed where you can use, environment-specific config import folder, right? So if your config export is in specific folder for specific environment, you just merge those two with a global config export and then use the specific configuration for specific environment where where you want to enable shield or disable shield, whatever. So I think that would be helpful in that case.
Thank you. Any other questions?
So I'm surprised. I don't think I heard anyone talk about sticking an override in the settings.php. Do we all think that's dead? You mentioned that before.
Yeah, that's what we do. So
Yeah.
For example, for the shield module for our local environments, we just have settings.local and just blast out the username and password from that. Or deval, we ignore that. And what I was talking about before, we ignore specific config being exported. So have it on development, but then exporting it doesn't actually export those settings files.
I think there is also an issue where you can't disable a module in settings on PHP. That's correct.
Yeah.
So you can't use settings on PHP to say get rid of this module. You can set values to null or to empty strings and things like that.
yeah,
You also can't unset configuration.
Yeah, you can't.
correct.
Yeah, you
Or
can't
add new one if it doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
yeah. So that's what's missing in settings on PHP if you're trying to do that. Any other questions?
I think this might be slightly off topic, but I think there's a contrib module that lets views look at config. And I'm not sure how the configuration is stored in the database, but would it scale to a lot of data if you wanted to use it to store content that was never going to be editable? Or is that not the right way to use config? So 1,000 bits of data, maybe 1,000 stores, do you know what I mean? That really perhaps is content, but you choose to store it in config.
Like a default content is called, or something. It might be called default content or something. They actually expose the content as a config. Is that what you mean?
I suppose so, yeah.
Yeah. I can see that being an issue when you have a lot of content, like in a multi-site setup. That would be interesting. This, yeah.
So we'll take one more question. That's this one. Okay. That's the last one. Sorry.
Right, this one might be just more of a troubleshoot. So if you guys ever run into a scenario where there's so much config that during the import process, MySQL actually goes away, Yeah, you have. How'd you deal with it?
Just throw more money in it.
Cool. Well, thanks to the panelists, thanks everyone for coming, and another round of applause.